The Forgotten Highway. Chapter 1. A Presence in the Haze. Emma had always been a cautious person, but her latest move into an apartment on Elm Street had sent her anxiety levels through the roof. At 20 years old, she was balancing her studies at the local college with a part-time job at a nearby coffee shop. Life was busy, and she was determined to make it work, but there was something about this new place that unsettled her. The apartment itself was charming, with high ceilings and large windows that let in plenty of light. Emma's landlord had described it as a cozy home away from home, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the place than met the eye. The walls seemed thicker than they should be, and she often caught herself staring at the corners of the room as if expecting something to jump out at her. One evening, as Emma was finishing up her homework in the living room, she felt a cold draft brush past her. She glanced around, but there was nothing out of place. Shaking off the odd sensation, she tried to focus on her work again, only to feel that same icy touch a few moments later. This time, it wasn't just a draft, it was as if an invisible presence had brushed against her shoulder. She looked up, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Determined not to let her fears get the best of her, Emma forced herself to concentrate on her assignment, even though the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing minute. Over the next few days, Emma began to notice other strange occurrences. She found items in her apartment that she was certain she hadn't moved herself. A book would be on one side of the room in the morning and on the other by evening. Her clothes would disappear from her closet only to reappear in mysterious locations around the apartment. At first, she tried to dismiss these incidents as mere coincidences or the result of her busy schedule, but the more they happened, the harder it became to ignore the feeling that something or someone was watching her. Emma began to feel like she was being followed, a sense of unsettling over her every movement. One night, while Emma was trying to sleep, she heard a faint whispering sound coming from the hallway. She sat up in bed, straining to hear, but the noise stopped as quickly as it had started. Shaking off the terror that had gripped her, she forced herself back into a lying position, telling herself it was probably just the wind or some other explainable factor. But no matter how much she tried to convince herself otherwise, the feeling that something was watching her from the shadows wouldn't go away. Emma's grip on reality started to slip, and she couldn't help but wonder if this strange new place had finally begun to take its toll on her mind. Chapter 2. The Lines Blur. The unexplained events in Emma's apartment continued to escalate, leaving her more disturbed with each passing day. She would come home to find her kitchen table rearranged or her bedroom furniture shifted out of place. It was as if an unseen force had been playing tricks on her, testing the limits of her sanity. At first, she tried to laugh off these incidents as a result of her busy schedule and stress, but as they became more frequent and elaborate, she knew something was seriously wrong. One evening, Emma arrived home late from work to find her apartment in disarray. Her favorite painting had been knocked off the wall, leaving a dent in the plaster, and personal items were scattered across the floor. The sight of her once tidy living space now a mess filled her with dread. Desperate for answers, she started investigating, trying to determine who or what could be behind these disturbing events. She examined every corner of the apartment, looking for clues or signs that might explain the chaos around her, but found nothing out of the ordinary. As days turned into weeks, Emma's anxiety grew. The feeling that something was watching her never left her mind, and she couldn't shake the fear that it was growing stronger. She began to avoid mirrors and always kept the lights on in her apartment, convinced that whatever was behind these incidents would be less likely to attack when visibility was poor. But no matter how careful she was, the strange occurrences continued, growing more intense and terrifying with each passing day. One night, as Emma lay in bed trying to fall asleep, she heard a faint scratching sound coming from the walls. She sat up immediately, her heart pounding in her chest. The sound stopped abruptly, leaving her paralyzed with fear. She strained to listen for any other noise, but there was nothing except the heavy silence of the night. Telling herself it was probably just the wind or some other harmless factor, she forced herself back into a lying position, trying to push the fear away. But as minutes ticked by and no more sounds came, she couldn't help but wonder if this was just the beginning, and what other horrors might be lurking in wait for her. The following morning, Emma arrived home to find another unsettling surprise waiting for her. Her laptop had been turned on, and a mysterious text message appeared on the screen. "You are not alone." The words seemed to hang in the air, chilling her to the core. She read the message again, hoping it was some sort of joke or misunderstanding, but the words remained unchanged. Fear surged through her as she tried to figure out who could have sent the text and what their intentions might be. Emma knew she had to find a way to stop whatever was haunting her apartment before it was too late, but every attempt seemed to fail, leaving her more isolated and afraid than ever before. The lines between reality and paranoia were blurring, and Emma couldn't tell if she was losing her mind or if something truly sinister was at work. The shadow on Elm Street was becoming all too real, and Emma was starting to wonder if there would be any escape from the terror that had taken hold of her life. Chapter 3. The Reflection. The weight of fear pressed down on Emma as she forced herself to face the reality of what was happening in her apartment. She couldn't ignore the mounting evidence that something sinister was lurking within its walls, and she knew she had to confront it head-on. Desperate for answers, Emma began to search for any clue that might help her make sense of the strange occurrences that had taken over her life. She scoured every room, examining every nook and cranny, but found nothing that could explain the terror that haunted her. One night, unable to sleep, Emma decided to go through her old belongings in an attempt to distract herself from the fear that seemed to grow stronger with each passing hour. As she rummaged through a box of old photos and letters, she came across something that made her heart race, a faded newspaper clipping about a former resident of the apartment who had mysteriously disappeared years ago. The article mentioned strange occurrences similar to those Emma was now experiencing: unexplained noises, objects moving on their own, and a sense of being watched. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she read the article again, hoping it was just a coincidence, but fearing that it might be the key to understanding the terror that had taken hold of her life. The more she read, the more convinced she became that there was something dark and evil lurking in her apartment, something connected to the missing resident. Her heart pounded as she made the connection between the article and her own experiences. Determined to find out what had happened to the former resident and why it seemed to be affecting her, Emma decided to investigate further. She spent days researching the case, speaking with neighbors and anyone who might have any information about the missing person. What she uncovered was a chilling tale of dark secrets and hidden dangers that seemed to be connected to her apartment. According to what she learned, the former resident had been involved in a series of occult activities that had gone unchecked for years. It appeared that someone or something had taken control of the apartment and continued these practices even after the resident's disappearance. The more Emma dug, the more disturbing the truth became. The entity that seemed to be haunting her apartment was not some random force, but a malevolent spirit connected to the occult activities of the former resident. With this revelation, Emma knew she had no choice but to confront the evil that had taken hold of her life. She would have to face the darkness and banish it once and for all if she wanted to save herself from the terror that seemed to be growing stronger with each passing day. The shadow on Elm Street was real, and Emma was ready to do whatever it took to defeat it and reclaim her life from the grip of fear. As Emma prepared to confront the malevolent spirit, she couldn't help but feel a mix of fear and determination. She knew that the road ahead would be dangerous, but she also knew that there was no turning back. She had to face the darkness head-on and emerge victorious if she wanted to save herself from the terror that had taken hold of her life. The shadow on Elm Street was about to be unveiled, and Emma was ready for the fight of her life.